his wife and he hiked the whole trail together. And I'm not sure what year that was, but she passed on a little later, and he kept hiking in many areas. He's from Michigan, so he hiked in Canada, and he would send us or bring us photographs of birds in those areas because I love birds. Well, when he and his wife came through Harper's Ferry on his through hike, he walked in the door. I had never met the man. I had sent him information, talked to him on the phone, but he walked in the door tall, like Lincoln, with his beautiful gray beard. He sat down at the chair in front of my desk, and he leaned on my desk, and he said, "Are you ready for this?" I said, "Oh, I'm ready for anything. I never know what's going to happen at the front desk." And he started to sing his Appalachian Trail song. Every state he went through, he had a rhyme or a melody and the lyrics for the state. And it was the AT through Georgia all the way up to Harper's Ferry. And then when he got to Harper's Ferry, of course, that was the end of the song for that moment. But he said, "And when I'm finished, I will call you and I'll sing you the rest of the song." I said, "Okay." We're talking about 3 months later, maybe 2 months. Sure enough, he got to Maine. He finished the song, and I had my, the phone at my ear at work. I'm listening to this song. Finally, I just said to everybody, "Get out of the way. I just want to hear this song." And he sang the whole thing all the way to Maine. And then I heard it again at the next ALDHA meeting. He sang it, and many more, I'm sure, but I didn't always get to that part of the entertainment. If he did it during the afternoon, I was always at the sales desk. But he's a wonderful man. He just is so enthusiastic. And I remember at the ALDHA meeting when they had a contest, or he started the contest somehow, and everybody was to bring apples from their state. And of course, Michigan, according to him, has the best apples. He won the first year. I don't know about the years after that, but they're still doing it. I'm a life member of ALDHA. Thank you, ALDHA. That was a wonderful gift. I wish I knew what year this was. It was maybe the second year or third year when they started to give life memberships to ALDHA. And I was maybe the first, and then Sam was the second, and Bonnie was the third, somewhere in that category. Now they alphabetize them all because there's a lot of them. And I remember being so shocked. I just stood there. I had no clue that they were even thinking about this because they were still a young organization. But that's the nature of ALDHA. Give the reward now and we'll get it paid for as time goes on, whatever works out. And it has worked out. It's just, I'm just as happy with that membership as I am with ATC's. That was another life membership, but ALDHA's was from the heart. Yeah. And I'm going to cry again if we're not careful here. Somebody I forgot to talk about was Ed Garvey. He was a wonderful inspiration for me when I first started to work at ATC. And many times I would call him. I only hiked as a college student. I didn't know a whole lot about the trail myself. And when I was offered the job, that was what I said to Colonel Holmes, who's the first director, who hired me. I said, I only have the experience on the trail in Pennsylvania. What am I going to do when people call me about all these other states? And there's all these guidebooks I never even saw a guidebook before. I went with a college group. And so I had to learn an awful lot. And I would call Ed Garvey every now and then and say, "Hey, Ed, you've done the whole trail. I need to know this and that and the other thing." And he was on the board of managers. And then I wasn't even aware of what the board of managers was up to that point because they met only once a year. Once a year? Well, anyway, Garvey made me feel so comfortable calling him and saying, I have a question here and I don't want to send these people off on the wrong trail or wrong track or whatever. And he would always sometimes he would come up to ATC and talk to me about it. And then when I'd see him at ALDHA, we'd sit down and he'd always say, "Now, what do you want to know?" Well, this was like 15 years later, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings and say, "Well, I pretty much know those books upside down, inside out, and backwards, but I'm sure there's something I can think of to ask you here." But he was so gracious, and he was a real foundation member of ALDHA. He had a lot to say in the very beginning, and people listened to him. They were always interested in. Thurston Griggs is another fellow. Maybe a lot of people hearing this won't know who I'm talking about, but he was from Baltimore, and he was a retired teacher, professor, played the cello in the Baltimore Symphony. He was the Ridge Runner for Maryland for 10 years at least. He was another one that was very interested in what ALDHA was doing. I don't know that he ever got involved, but he'd always ask me, how was the meeting, and what did you learn that we can benefit from? Everybody respected ALDHA. They might not have been interested enough to join and come along, but they all had great respect for these people who loved the AT and who were proving it by helping, and I'm sort of coming into what I feel ALDHA really is and how it has evolved over these years. It's a diamond always in the rough, which means it's always changing. It's always getting polished. But there'll always be those rough spots that make it what it is. Down home is all the two words that make me think about, that remind me of ALDHA. When you talk about down home things, ALDHA's down home. It's earthy. It's inclusive. And when you're in an organization that's inclusive, you feel loved, you feel supported, which of course support is part of love, but it's a feeling that people can take with them from the meeting, which will last them till the next meeting. And even after the meetings are over, they will always have this wonderful, supportive group of people who started out with that foundation, with that, what's the word here? Principle. It's a law of ALDHA that you love one another, you love the trail, you love to volunteer. What more does the world need than a group like that? That's my ALDHA. One thing that impressed me about Warren, when he wasn't on the trail and in the office talking about the trail and information for his groups that he took out, I'll never forget this as long as I live. He came in the office with the group, and we had planned ahead of time to sit in the back of the visitor center there at ATC and just kick back and talk about what these people should expect on the trail. A real crossroads, or a real variety of ages too. I think the youngest was maybe a teenager and the oldest was retired. And so I had to briefly kind of give them the AT's outlook on what they were about to do, and that we were there to support them. Well, we did that a number of times, Warren and his group and me, or I, and this one time, and I don't know, well, I think it's almost a religious experience. We sat down and Warren started to ask me a question and I'd answer, and then of course one thing would lead to another and someone else would ask a question and I would answer. And then I would get off on my own little tangent about this wonderful opportunity and what it would mean to them way down the pike. There was something clicked that day that I've never had happen before or again that was just almost reverential. It was like God was sitting back there listening to this group and blessing them. It was very hard to describe, but afterwards, Warren looked at me and I looked at him. Neither one of us said what we were thinking, but we just smiled at each other like we got it right.